Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. In my opinion, one of the most underrated and not thoroughly looked at causes for both good health but theoretically also for longevity is the will to survive, the will to simply say, I refuse to A, get sick or become unhealthy, or B, die eventually is what it essentially comes down to. You often hear things like, oh, so-and-so's grandmother or my great aunt or someone older in my family just flat out refused to die and she just kept going even though her mind was half gone from perhaps Alzheimer's and there's maybe some health issues that were building up, but they just flat out refused to die. And that is something that I think anyone who has had experiences being around people who are dying or watched as a relative made that progression towards dying, that it's a real thing, that people essentially choose when to die. You frequently hear stories about people who have a relative who is getting sick and dying, maybe this was even you, where they were on their deathbed and this person, if it was you or someone you knew, didn't live near them and they had to travel to go see them. And they were right on the cusp of dying, but they held on until they could see that person. And this does happen. And yes, that's not to say someone with an extremely rapid, fast-acting disease that you can't just suddenly say, I'm not going to die, and you survive somehow. Or, you get infected with something or get bit by a poisonous animal and you're going to die. You're going to die if that's the case of something really severe and fast-acting. But if we're talking about, old age or the general breakdown of the body, part of it is a choice. So if you have that choice in the final, days or hours of whether you can let go sooner or later, what do you think happens on a day-to-day basis over the course of your life? If you have that primal instinct to survive and it's strong within you, that strong instinct of survival, if you project that through your life and live every day as if you know that you're going to survive and that you're going to thrive, you're not going to get sick, you're going to live a long time, what kind of impact do you think that has on your physiology to believe that profoundly? It's something that, can't be measured. I mean, they do obviously measure things and understand that the placebo effect, which is the belief in something or even just the power of belief, is beneficial for you, it's going to have that beneficial effect. So if you simply believe that believing in the fact that you are going to live a long time perhaps has one of the greatest impacts on your lifespan than anything that you can do from diet to exercise, etc. That's a pretty bold statement. I'm not saying that's fact because it's not really measurable, but that comes into this idea that our thoughts shape both our health but also our reality around us. It's something I talk about more often, I guess, on my vlogging channel because it's a little more esoteric, but that is essentially, I think, something that is very empowering to take on as an idea, and that when you do that, you realize that by purposely becoming positive about these things, not throwing around words like, oh, I'm going to die early because I live this type of lifestyle or something, then you start to internalize the idea that you're going to live a long life, and who knows, it might just contribute to a few extra years or a lot of extra years. Another thing I think it's very effective for is, once again, the idea of survival. So overcoming obstacles. If we were to look at larger populations and cultures, the ones we see with the strongest instinct to survive have been the ones that have overcome the greatest hurdles and then gone on to do incredible things. So take, for instance, the Spartans of Greece. We're all, if you've seen it, familiar with especially the scenes from the movie 300 and King Leonidas and his iron, indomitable will, and also the athletic and warrior prowess of the people of Sparta, the Spartans. But it's that driving force, the refusal to bow down to the influence of an oppressive regime that spurred this small group of highly skilled warriors to fend off tens, if not hundreds, if not millions of soldiers, and allow for the whole land of Greece to rise up and prevent the armies from marching in to affect Europe, which would have totally reshaped and changed the future of all of Europe. Then some cultures haven't been as lucky. It really depends on how obvious the threat that is coming is. Of course, there's been times when an oppressive regime has been oppressive in a covert way, where before that culture knows it, they've totally been taken over. That's very unfortunate, but once again, we have to look at that driving force, that will to survive. How powerful are they with that vitality, that jing, to be able to rise up and stand up for themselves? If we look at different cultures and all throughout history, we can pick out and see the cultures that had more of this power than others. I'm not trying to say, the ones that did have longer lifespans, but they had, that survivability, and that can be translated into other areas of life too. Anyone who's played sports, been part of a team, or done any kind of competitive athletic endeavor, even if it's solo versus other people, you know that there's this line that you reach when you're competing, and you just push, and then you reach that point and you just can't push anymore and you give up. Some people obviously are much more skilled at going past that point. I mean, it's kind of a fail-safe inbuilt thing. Sometimes our bodies can do fine pushing past that, and it's a good thing. Other times that point actually is there because we're doing damage to our body if we push past it. But if you've been part of any kind of competitive sport, whether solo or as a team, you know that that point is there, and you've reached it probably at some point, and you know what it feels like. Whether you win or lose the event that you're competing in, reaching that point is an extreme mental state. And that's where a lot of exercise science is moving into today, is to help teach athletes how to push beyond that to succeed, which is both good in the sense of, building up that willpower to move beyond and break through barriers, but, then you're also setting yourself up for possible injuries and things when you get into that highly altered mental state when you're at peak performance levels. Once again, if we return to the practicality of thinking about these concepts, when it comes to health, you're obviously not going to be hurting yourself by imagining that you have really good health. You're not going to hurt yourself by imagining you're going to live a long life. The only thing that could come out of it is good, unless you're so delusional that you think you're going to be immortal and you do things that are risky and you end up killing yourself. So a lot of people criticize younger people and say that they often get caught into this sort of like, I'm going to live forever type of mentality, and they do stupid things. The whole motto that so many people are saying these days, which I will absolutely not utter in this video, you might know what I'm talking about. It's a 4-letter acronym, but that actually is a self-defeating acronym, because if you're living by that, it's limiting. It's saying, life is short, essentially, so let's burn the candle at both ends. I'm saying life is long, acknowledge that it's long, and live life fully, but not with limits. That's basically what I say at the end of every single one of my videos. Embrace life without limits. I'm talking in two ways there. Embrace life without limits in the sense of do things without limiting yourself, but also embrace longevity without a cap on it. Science sometimes says that the human cap for longevity is 120. I do not believe that for 1 second. That's the Guinness Book of World Records cap on what they found to be the longest living human, which is Jean-Louis Calment of France, who lived to be 122. I don't believe there's any other recorded human to have ever reached 120. But you have to remember, this is by their standards of people who have had a birth certificate that's got enough officiality behind it to be able to prove this without a doubt. And that's great. We can say that. But how many cultures 120 plus years ago had the level of certification that they're looking for to be able to prove this? I frequently come across claims of long-lived people even beyond 122, but because they existed in somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere in China or somewhere else at a time before, good record keeping was kept and official enough, then it's disregarded, even though this person might have lived to 125 or this person might have lived to 130 something. Even beyond that, 160, I've heard of certain people rumored to have lived in places like Azerbaijan, in I think that's the Caucasus region. These are just examples that can inspire us to think about limitless longevity. And once again, you don't have to go around telling people this because you might think it's embarrassing, and that's really the only downside to thinking this way, but what does it actually hurt to actually imagine that you have that potential within you? So ponder on this, consider it. I'm not telling you how to think, I'm just throwing it out there as a possible option, as to something most people haven't thought about. And, breaking down mental barriers can always be good. There's very little bad that can come from this. So with that, like, favorite, and share the video if you feel so inclined. And I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.